Yo, Big IV, Big Four by the people for the people. And this is the For the Real Only channel. Like, share, and subscribe. And hit that notification bell so you can stay tapped in as well. It's not a game. It's not a test. It's the real thing. And we back again. Day 3 of the trial of Keefe D. Davis for the unalive and the Tupac Shakur. And today, we had testimony from a retired FBI agent, and we had testimony from a retired detective on the Christopher Wallace task force. Now, this thing here focuses on proffer agreements and meetings. Now, you about to see here, read it yourself, what a proffer is supposed to be. So this focused on 2 different proffers. One was in 1998 that resulted in Keefe D getting over 6 years in prison. And then we know about the famous 2008 proffer, but we'll get to that in a second. But the Safe Streets Task Force, FBI, it was an investigation going on into the Grape Street Crips in Watts. So they were just looking for normal gang activity and, stuff that goes on in that life, whether it was drugs, violence, or whatever. So Keefe D was out there hanging out and being out there around, hiding out, whatever he was doing, I don't know. But he was out there and he came across their desks. And then, he was being wiretapped. He was on wires, on phones, doing a lot of extra talking. So in the midst of that, they heard him setting some things up. So they went and, came at him and told him, like, look, we got you for trafficking 2 bricks or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So that's what they came at him with, and they got him to talk. It was no possession, but they came at him over the conversations on the phone. So he agreed, to a proffer. He was facing 10 years. He agreed to a proffer agreement, and boy, did he do some talking. Now, I got all kind of notes. I'm going to try to get through this as fast as I can. I just want to let you know some of the stuff Keefe D was telling. Tell all Keefe. That's what we're going to call him. So, he mentioned his plugs. He had 2 or 3 different plugs. One from Colombia that went back. Another one from Mexico that ran into some trouble with law enforcement and slid. Like 3 or 4 different plugs. He mentioned all his plugs, but, they was gone. He admitted to receiving at times 200 to 300 units, and was getting a lot of money, and then had to downgrade like a mother effer once, his first initial Colombian plug was gone. He got into how he met Zip and how he met Zip at a baseball game through one of his people's fats and due to PCP transactions and things like that, and he also admitted to having his part of Southside, locked. Now, let's get into this, right? He also admitted to he alleged that he helped pass along 80 grand that he owed somebody that went as seed money to start Death Row. Now, remember I was talking about that rivalry with him and Reggie. Look, just running through it real quick. He said Reggie and his father was crooked. He said Reggie allegedly was distributing, D rugs out of an auto body shop that was called the Untouchables. It was owned by a man named Melvin Hurd. And he said Suge was initially running these D rugs, but when he got locked up, Reggie took over. And he had Mob, James, and all these people working for him. The homeboy security. He touched on the mall incident and what happened, and about them beating up the Bloods that attacked a Southside Crip by the name of Marcus. He said when the situation took place that they would not have attacked under any circumstances and sought revenge against Tupac and Suge or anybody in the entourage because of the heavy police presence there, that they would have never done that. So he said after it happened, they all just went to their rooms and had a good time that night. They didn't do anything. He gave up people who he was supplying in and out of state in California. Gave up people he was supplying in and out of state. It was so much there that he admitted. His own theory that he said in this 98 proffer was that he believed Combs and his associates took out Pac, and he believed Death Row and their associates took out Big. And he did admit, this retired FBI agent, he did admit that, they had told Keefe that nothing would be held against him. And this wasn't recorded. He said that nothing would be held against them. But I will say that the prosecution got up there and, brought that issue back up and had him confirm that there was no immunity agreement. It doesn't mean that he was immune. He was receiving immunity for any crimes. It just meant that his statements could not be used to prosecute him for anything. Okay, fast forward, Darren Dupree. Now, this is a detective on the LAPD that was a part of the Christopher Wallace task force. This task force was formed because of the information, the theory that started with Russell Poole, that rogue, corrupt LAPD officers were involved in the murder of Christopher Wallace, aka the Notorious B.I.G. And she filed a big lawsuit. I think it was about $400 million or something like that. So they wanted to prove or disprove this. This is why this task force was formed. So they were initially investigating the Southside Compton Crips and Death Row. And it started with Keefe because Keefe had an Impala, and an Impala was the car that, the trigger man was in that hit Biggie. So what they wanted to do was come at him. So they were surveilling him, watching him, tapping his phones and everything else. So they found out he was involved. Now, he was a shadow of his former self as far as being a dealer is concerned. So they came at him over a kilo and a gallon of PCP. And he was facing a life sentence. And his family and friends were involved. They would have got time too. So he took it on the chin and decided to go ahead and cooperate to save his people. Whether they knew that or not is a matter of debate. So now this other proffer comes up, and this is where we get the infamous thing with Greg Kading. Now, I want to say that FBI agent didn't remember anything, didn't have proof of anything that Keefe D told him, the earlier agent. They didn't substantiate whether anything was true or not. They couldn't confirm it. You know what I'm saying? So they just gave him the deal. This was the same thing, but this time it was recorded. And this happened in 2008 and 2009, proffer agreements. They agreed that, it wouldn't be, he basically wouldn't be prosecuted. So Christopher Wallace Task Force, several meetings. Once again, Greg Kading was at the time heading this up, and they wanted to start with the whole lead with Puffy giving the money for the hit on Tupac and Zip and everything like that. But as we know, they went out there undercover, with Keefe D, and he tried to make contact with Zip, and Zip just like spun him. So after that, they gave up. They quit. They just tapped out. Like, all right, they wanted to start with that. They went for the big fish, and it didn't work. So they never took the time out to substantiate and see whether anything else he said was true. Now, once again, I must say, they are not proving this case. How can they be proving this case? It again looks like he's a liar, because the stuff that he said in both of these proffers is slightly different. It differs in a lot of areas, and you never proved it. So the agents in both of these cases can't even say whether or not what he told them was the truth. So how can they say whether he telling a lie or telling the truth? So that how can they be proving he's credible? The lawyer did a better job today. I got to give him some kudos today. He definitely, it was his day. I feel like if I got to give it to somebody, I'll give it to the defense rather than the prosecution on this day. But no, not even these people can substantiate what Keefe D was saying. So again, they're not proving this case. People think it's open and shut, but so far, we only on day 3 now. Maybe speaking too soon. He could walk. He could walk. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Big IV, Big 4 by the people, for the people. We out.